Mothers are generally described as gentle, loving, nurturing, and protective. When you have a question, you call your mom or find a mom. When you can't find something, mom can. For some reason, mom can just always make everything better. Unfortunately, some women never get those motherly instincts, and the children suffer greatly, occasionally leading to tragedy. Welcome back to Justice 4. We're your hosts. I'm Jackie.
And I'm Sam.
Susan Smith was just denied parole 30 years into serving a life sentence for killing her two sons, Michael and Alexander, back in 1994. A lot of you asked for a full episode on this case. And since we were just toddlers when this happened, we thought it'd be perfect to really dive into. So, we both knew of this case and the big main facts, but honestly, I was shocked at how many layers there truly were to this case.
No, seriously, when she was texting me about it, it was kind of funny. So, we were supposed to do this episode together also. We were both going to be reading to you because we haven't done that in so long. But then we were just like, nah,
Yeah. All right. So, buckle up, buttercups, as we dive into the tragic deaths of Michael and Alexander Smith.
Oof.
Let's go back to the fall of 1988 in Union, South Carolina, a town small enough that it only has one stoplight. Susan was beginning her senior year of high school and had just been promoted at her job at the Winn-Dixie to head cashier.
Oh,
And was
Winn-Dixies.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know. I loved writing that in here.
Ugh.
And she was secretly dating an older married coworker. Well,
Scandalous.
make that secretly dating two of her coworkers at the same time. And if that wasn't scandalous enough for a high schooler, Susan then discovered she was pregnant.
My goodness.
She got an abortion, and then both men decided to
In
break
the
up with
80s?
her. Yes. So this caused both men to break up with her. Obviously. This caused Susan to sink into a deep depression, and she tried to commit suicide by overdosing on Tylenol and aspirin. And this wasn't Susan's first suicide attempt. When she was 13 years old, she tried the same thing in the same way. Susan spent a month recovering from her suicide attempt, and then she resumed her job at the Winn-Dixie.
With the dudes?
Her managers and coworkers were apparently very supportive of her, and I don't know about you, but I'm not showing my face in there again.
Nah.
We're gonna go to the next town over to grocery shop. No, not happening. But it was a small town, so there probably wasn't a lot of options for a teenager for work.
Yeah.
But still, I'm crawling in a hole. When Susan returned to work, she became rather friendly with a stock clerk named David Smith. She knew David from high school, and by the summer of 1990, David and Susan started dating, which would have been fine if David wasn't engaged to his longtime fiancée, Christy.
Brother, what is up with this small town ass drama? What?
Oh, just wait.
Also, coworker? Why does she keep going for coworkers?
Just wait.
Oh no. Okay.
David viewed Susan as something casual and not serious. That is until January of 1991 when Susan found out she was pregnant. David then told Christy about Susan and broke the relationship off with Christy. Susan and David then decided to get married, and Susan was really upset that she had to now give up her college dreams. Even though she had no idea where she wanted to go to college or what she wanted to study, she was mad she had to give up those dreams. Susan's mom, Linda, and stepdad, Bev, did not approve of any of this. His name was Beverly, but we're going to call him Bev.
Okay.
Because everybody else did. David came from the country and didn't have a college education, so he was lesser in their eyes. Susan was raised in the city and was raised with more money, and they thought she deserved more, which was kind of laughable because Susan didn't live this life until her stepdad came into her life. So she wasn't always raised in that nature. Even her parents' disapproval of David couldn't stop 19-year-old Susan from marrying 20-year-old David. On March 15th of 1991, Susan was 2 months pregnant at this time. And David had planned to renovate his great-grandmother's house for them to live in and raise a family. Susan wasn't jumping for joy over it, but she was okay with it.
Ma'am, you're getting a house.
That is until Linda and Bev saw it. They hated it. It wasn't acceptable for their Susan or the baby to live in.
She's a little princess.
And Susan fell in line with them. Susan worked at the Winn-Dixie until she went into labor. and Michael Daniel Smith was born on October 10th, 1991. And Michael was given the middle name Daniel in honor of David's brother who died right before their wedding.
Bummer.
Yes. It comes into play later.
I figured.
But yeah, so in Susan's parents' eyes, she is this princess on this pedestal.
Ugh.
But it's only presented that way. And you'll find out more later. So don't think that we live that kind of life for her all the way.
I don't, but I have questions for the parents already. Linda.
Oh, you're going to have some more here in a minute.
Beverly.
Susan went right back to working part-time at the Winn-Dixie after Michael was born, but she also started taking college classes. And by this point, David had become manager at the Winn-Dixie. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family who was doing everything. The truth was so much different. David and Susan were young, and marriage and babies are so stressful without also trying to navigate the world. Mm-hmm. Susan was more into material things and often lived above their means, constantly having to take loans from Linda, and that wasn't all. Susan and David were constantly having affairs on each other.
I mean,
so this
you lose them how you get them, babe.
So this led to their first separation shortly after their 1-year wedding anniversary. They would go through a few more separations before becoming pregnant a second time in November of 1992. Which, it's just wild that we keep getting pregnant. Fertile Myrtle.
Yeah.
Susan did not enjoy this pregnancy at all. It was nothing like her first pregnancy, and she constantly complained about becoming fat and ugly, and she really started to distance herself from David. And David began feeling really lonely, so he did what we're going to expect him to do. He started a relationship with a cashier at the Winn-Dixie.
Does she still working yet, though?
Yeah. Well, she just had the baby. Or she's pregnant right now. So, yeah, she's still working there. And Susan got suspicious of this and would begin showing up the store and screaming at any female employees David would speak to.
Good golly.
Susan ends up giving birth to their son, Alexander Tyler Smith, on August 5th, 1993. But this time, emergency C-section. And David and Susan decided to put aside their differences and make this new little family work. So they were going to move back in together and live happily ever after. And this lasted for 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Before David moved out.
All right.
Susan didn't want to go back to work at Winn-Dixie, where David was going to be her manager. And she would have to work alongside his new girlfriend.
Uh-huh.
Because that's just a weird situation for everyone. Instead, she went to work for Conso Products as their bookkeeper, and then she became the assistant to the executive secretary for the president and CEO, Carrie Finley. Susan really enjoyed this job. She got to dress up every day, talk to different people constantly. She was handling hotels arrangements for out-of-town clients, arranging Mr. Finley's travel. Conso had factories in Great Britain, Canada, and Mexico. So there's a lot of dealings internationally, and Susan was getting exposed to a much richer lifestyle than she already liked. And Susan also enjoyed going out with coworkers for lunch and after work for drinks or dinner, and she did this often. It was on one of those nights out for drinks that Susan got to know Tom Finley, the president of Conso's son. Tom worked in the graphics department and had just graduated from college. He was a young, good-looking, rich guy. He was single, and honestly, every woman in the town was eyeing him at this point.
Okay.
So, when David and Susan separated again in January of 1994, when Alex was just 5 months old, Tom and Susan began dating. Shocking.
Wow.
Yeah. They went to lunch and the movies. She attended parties thrown by Tom at his father's estate. By the spring of 1993, Tom and Susan had broken up, and David and the cashier had broken up. So David and Susan said, "What the fuck? Let's move back in together and make this marriage work."
Oh, wait. They were still married this entire time?
Yeah. Because the boys need both parents. This lasted till late summer when Susan asked for a divorce and David got an apartment 2 miles down the road. And they began to co-parent Michael and Alex. In Susan's eyes, life was going perfect. She had full custody of Michael and Alex. She was working full time. She was taking college courses at the University of South Carolina and started seeing Tom again. She believed that her dreams of them being together were finally going to happen, and she was going to have this life that she always wanted.
How did this woman keep winning these men back? Like, over and over and over again.
She just one of those girls that can just get in there, the flirt and the tell them what they want and act and be this person that they want. I don't. Yeah, it's very interesting how she keeps doing this. So the money, the houses, the status. She was so infatuated with this idea of what her life was going to be that she didn't see it coming when Tom broke it off with her for being too clingy and needy, among other things. The among other things we'll get into.
Wonderful.
This destroyed Susan. She began drinking more and became less outgoing. She went to Tom's cottage on October 23rd and tried to get him back. She did everything she could think of, including telling him about her sexual relationship with her stepdad, Bev. And I have no idea how she thought that was going to get him back, but that's something she used.
Wait. Was that true or is
Yes.
this something she made up?
It's true, and we will get into that later, but I have to bring it up there. Tuesday, October 25th, 1994, started out like any other day. Susan got up and made breakfast for Michael and Alex, got them dressed, and dropped them off at daycare before heading to work. Susan went out to lunch with coworkers that day, and Tom Finley happened to join the group. Around 1:30, Susan asked her supervisor if she could leave work early. When asked if something was wrong, Susan responded that she was upset because she was in love with somebody who doesn't love her. When asked who she was talking about, Susan just responded, Tom Finley. But it can never happen because of my children. But Susan didn't leave right after this. She just went back to her desk. She does eventually leave that day. At 2:30, Susan called Tom and asked him to meet her outside of work to discuss some things. Tom pressed Susan, and she said that David was threatening to expose her publicly for cheating the IRS, and having an affair with Tom's dad. Tom told Susan that they could be friends, but nothing more ever.
How messy can you get?
Pretty fucking messy, apparently.
Oh, we're not even like halfway through her messy.
Good gravy.
So you would think that Susan would get the message after this. But she didn't.
Clearly.
No. She then tracked Tom down at the company's photo studio to give him back his Auburn University sweatshirt. Tom refused to take it back, though, and told Susan, keep it. She then went to pick up Michael and Alex from daycare. On the way home with them, Susan spotted her friend Sue and asked her to ride back to Conso with her. She needed to talk to Tom, but needed someone to watch the boys in the car while she did it. Tom was not happy to see Susan and escorted her out of the building.
Period.
Susan then took Sue home, and then she went home with the boys. It just so happened that Sue was attending a dinner with Tom that evening, and Susan had the audacity to call the restaurant, asked to speak with Sue. When she got on the phone with Sue, she asked if Tom had brought her up at all. Had he asked about her? Were they talking about her?
Okay,
Susan.
so she's a stage 5 clinger.
Oh, yeah.
Good gravy.
Sue goes, no, he hasn't. This was obviously not what Susan wanted to hear, but she got off the phone.
This man wants fucking nothing to do with her. It's time to move on, sweetie.
Yeah. It was around 8 p.m. when Susan got her 3-year-old son, Michael, dressed in a white jogging suit and dressed 14-month-old Alex in a red and white striped outfit, then strapped them into their car seats, and she started to drive around Union. Susan was a wreck from the rejection of Tom. The dream life she had been imagining was slipping away. She began driving in the direction of John D. Long Lake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take a pause and sip this so I can make it through.
Yep.
Woo! All right.
Do I need to read this part?
No, I got it.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Around 9 p.m., Shirley and Rick McLeod were relaxing in the living room before bed when Shirley heard a commotion outside the front door. They opened the front door to a hysterical Susan Smith telling them, "Please help me. He's got my kids. He's got my car." Shirley let Susan in, and Rick yelled to his son, Rick Jr., to call 911. We're going to play you the dispatch relay and the 911 call. It's kind of confusing. Like, you hear him on 911, but then you also hear the operators talking to dispatch.
Okay.
So we're going to play that for you and then come back.
Yeah, there's a lady that come up that door, and some guy jumped into a red light with her car with her 2 kids in it, and he took off, and she got out of the car here at our house.
Then he's got the kids?
Yes, ma'am, in her car. And she's real hysterical, and I just decided I need to call the law and get them down here.
Get them going, Pam. I got 2 kids.
So obviously there's a lot of confusion about what is actually going on, but we're responding, we're reacting, and we're getting officers out there, which is awesome. Snaps to this dispatch lady. She's great. So Shirley gets Susan calmed down enough to tell her what happened. And Susan proceeded to tell Shirley that she was stopped at the red light at Monarch Mills, and a black man jumped in her car and told her to drive. She asked him why he was doing this, and he said, "Shut up and drive or I'll kill you." Susan continued and told Shirley that at the abductor's direction, she drove northeast of Union for about 4 miles until he made me stop past the sign. Shirley confirmed that the sign was for John D. Long Lake, which was located several hundred yards outside of Shirley's front door. "He told me to get out. He made me stop in the middle of the road. Nobody was coming, not a single car." Susan continued, "I asked him, why can't I take my kids?" Susan told Shirley that the man said, "I don't have time." Susan said that the man pushed her out of the car while he was pointing a gun at her side. Susan continued by telling Shirley that when he finally got me out, he said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt your kids." Susan described how she had laid on the ground as the man drove away as both of her sons cried out for their mother. After a while, Susan wasn't sure how long. She began to run and didn't stop until she was on their porch. As a mom, there are so many things that are wrong with that story.
As someone who's not a mom, there's still a lot of things wrong with that
You're
story.
going to have to pry my hands off that seat. You're going to have to shoot me. You're going to have to pry me off that bumper. You're going to have to do a whole lot to get me out that car without my kids.
If he's just pointing the gun at your side, just like, okay, shoot my side, please.
Well,
I understand there's vital organs, but like,
yeah,
I'll fight someone. There's a reason I have talons.
But you're going to hear this story quite a few times. So we're going into the initial.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to go through the other things that begin to happen at this house, because this was something that I found very strange and very weird. And the more it happened, the weirder it got for me. Mm-hmm. Susan then asked to use the bathroom and if she can call her mom. Not the father of her children. Her now missing children. Her mom. When she can't get a hold of her mom, she calls her stepdad Bev. Again, not David. And when he doesn't answer, she finally calls David. But there's going in the bathroom and coming out of the bathroom between these calls as well. And by the time she finally calls David...
Hold on. So between each phone call, she would go to the bathroom.
So she came in and Sherry, they made the 911 call. Yeah. Sherry calmed her down. She told the story. She has to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And call her mom.
Yeah.
So she goes to the bathroom, and I think she went and took the phone in the bathroom, called her mom or whatever was in the kitchen. You know, we had the long cords. You could do whatever. Give her privacy. This is a very traumatic situation at the moment. Right. So, and then, because by the time she's calling David, the sheriff is arriving at the house. That is how long it's taking her to do this. But we have gone to the bathroom probably at least twice before the sheriff has come.
Okay. Did they confirm those calls actually went to those people?
It's the 90s, so we're a phone on the wall. I don't really know if we're checking call records, but, like, obviously no one answered, so... Okay. So, by the time the sheriff gets there, she's calling David, and he is already, like, he's not just, like, arriving when she's calling David. He's already starting to direct people and search efforts and, like, figuring things out, okay?
Snaps for the
So,
sheriff.
which is, it just, I'm stuck on the fact how long it took her to call him. Okay.
True.
And,
I mean, police are quick, especially like in small towns, but
like, every time she does a retelling part of the story, she'll go to the bathroom afterwards.
Yeah.
And it kind of seemed that she was, like, resetting herself or gathering herself or, like,
she was
okay.
probably doing that, like, staring at herself in the mirror thing.
And, like, it's okay. We've got this. So, Sheriff Howard Wells was one of the first responding officers that evening. And since he was friends with Susan's brother, Scotty, Wells figured that he would sit down and have Susan retell her story, even though he had already heard it from dispatch. The sheriff noted that Susan was wearing a gray Auburn University sweatshirt, and her face was puffy and red.
She was wearing the sweatshirt?
Yeah. Wells quickly realized that this was going to be more than his department could handle alone, and he called the head of South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, also known as SLED. The priority was getting all the info they could to help find Michael and Alex. By this time, Linda, Bev, David, and other family members had been arriving at the McLeod residence, and it's kind of became the staging area, the gathering, figuring everything. Police began to take a sketch of the man based off of Susan's description. And the search began for a black man that Susan described, and her maroon Mazda protege begins. The sketch and pictures of Susan's car are released all over the news, and the sketch depicted a black man around 40 wearing a dark knit cap, a dark shirt, jeans, and a plaid jacket. This is the most generic of generic sketches that you could ever come up with. Around midnight, the sheriff suggested that the Smith family find another meeting place and let the McLeods go back to their life, which makes sense because their house literally got taken over at like almost 10 o'clock at night.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either until I was reading it.
the
I was like,
poor
oh, these poor
McLeods.
people were just like being good Samaritans and now they want to go to bed.
Do they get
But
brought
my
back?
nosy ass would have been like, no, stay. You want me
Same.
to cook something? What are we all feeling for breakfast?
I can make a lasagna really quick.
Really quick. What do we all like to drink? Coffee? I can go get some more.
Same.
Dude, imagine how pissed they were when they found out the truth.
Oh,
my
yeah.
Gosh, I can't.
Oh,
Do
So-
they get involved later, or is this the end of
This
the
is the end of
McLeods?
McLeod's, yeah.
Oh, I hate that for these people, but also I love
Oh,
it for them because
yeah.
they probably didn't want to go through it.
I mean, it's probably not the end of it because a lot of shit happens like right outside their like 100 yards from their house after this. So they're
They
not like
probably did,
completely,
like-
but they're like, no one really like bothers them anymore.
They probably did like news.
Yeah. So Susan suggests her parents' house, and Susan and David ride to Linda's house alone. On the way over, Susan tells David that Tom Finley may come by to see her and that he shouldn't be angry. Which David thought was extremely wild and inappropriate for Susan to be thinking of Tom when their children are missing.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, Susan's carjacking and missing Michael and Alex are national news, and Susan and David begin doing press conferences, desperately asking to be on the lookout for the car and the boys. Soon, all of David and Susan's family were at Linda and Bev's house. Susan was never alone, and someone was constantly there to comfort her, which was quite the opposite of the loneliness that Susan had been struggling with lately. Tom Finley never stopped by to check on Susan, but he did call about Michael and Alex and to express his sympathy for Michael and Alex and what's going on.
He fucked up doing that.
And Susan quickly changed the subject to her and Tom. And Tom responded by telling her to focus on her children and not their relationship, and ended the phone call.
This woman is so delulu though.
So Delulu.
Oh my goodness.
But Susan got her hopes up when coworkers visited her. But Tom wasn't among them. And when Sue came by to visit Susan, her first question was, is Tom planning to come see me? Has he asked about me? On October 26th, a massive search for Alex and Michael began. And it attracted some surprising help. The Adam Walsh Center came to assist in the search. And you may recognize his name or his father's name, John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted.
Mm-hmm.
John Walsh became a household name after his son Adam Walsh went missing from a Sears while shopping with his mom. He was found dead 10 days later, and his killer has never been found. John and his wife, Reeve, have dedicated their lives to changing the system. The Adam Walsh Center sent 2 people, Margaret and Charlotte, to help the Smith family out.
Mm-hmm.
When they arrived, they sprang into action. And they were making plans, printing out flyers to hand out. And Susan and David were called to the police station for some interviews. And while they did that, Margaret was talking to Sled about doing press conferences with a public plea to get the boys back. Everyone agreed that it was a great idea to get Susan and David in front of the cameras. So they jumped right on this.
I had no idea that the Walshes joined in on this. How did
I
I
had
not know about that?
no idea that they did it either. And I was
That's
pretty
amazing.
shocked when I found that out. And they actually stay with this case the whole way through.
Good for them.
Charlotte and
Oh my goodness.
Margaret
Yeah.
are there assisting the whole time.
If you don't know about the Adam Walsh case, you must be very, very new into the true crime world.
And that's okay, and we welcome you, but
Yes.
you should definitely look at that.
Because John Walsh has...
He's a phenomenal man.
Oh my god, I don't know how to further explain him.
And his wife, the things that they
Yeah.
have done
Yeah,
is incredible.
absolutely. So look into it after you're done with this episode.
After interviewing Susan, the police just couldn't shake a few inconsistencies in her stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like Susan saying when she stopped at the light, there weren't any cars around. But the direction she was driving would always be green unless another car was at the light. It's a small town. It's how those lights are done with their sensors. But
yeah.
We're going to get more into some inconsistencies in a moment, but I just needed to give you an idea that they were beginning to be suspicious from the start.
Yep.
The following day, October 27th, news stations from all over the country gathered as David stood by Susan's side and addressed the country pleading for Michael and Alex back. And we're going to play that clip for you.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home to us where they belong. Our lives have been torn apart by this tragic event. I can't express how much they are wanted back home, how much we love them, we miss them. They are our hearts. And who I have prayed every day, and there's not 1 minute that goes by that I don't think about these boys. And I have prayed that whoever has them, that the Lord would let him realize that they are missed and loved more than any children in this world.
I would like to take the time to plead to the American public that you please do not give up on these 2 little boys in the search for their return safe home to us. That you continue to look for this car, these 2, our children, and for the suspect himself, that you continue to keep your eyes open, and anything that you see that might would help to please call and let it be known.
It's just heartbreaking for David, to hear David and his pleas. But
I agree.
I'm sorry.
Just how much he's trying to sit there and comfort her, arm around her, rubbing her, he's trying.
And her
to be there for her.
non-tear crying ass.
Just as, I don't know, I play D&D because I'm a nerd. You're welcome. But recently I was overcome with sadness or some shit. And so I'm sitting there faking crying. Guess what it sounded like? That. When she did the...
That's what it sounds like when my kid tries to fake cry. When she's in her room fake crying and we know the difference. That's what that sounded like.
There is a very distinct difference, people. Sorry.
If you haven't heard this case, I'm sorry, but you'll understand here in a minute.
Yeah.
After David and Susan made their public pleas for Michael and Alex, they were questioned for 6 hours, and the FBI administered polygraph tests. David's test concluded he knew nothing about the children's disappearance. Susan's test, on the other hand, came back inconclusive. Her
Really?
biggest red flag for them was the question, do you know where your children are? Susan was told her results, but she only told David that she didn't think she did well and that she thinks that they could be starting to question her story. Which is kind of an odd thing to say, Susan. This is the only polygraph test that David took. Susan, on the other hand, took one just about every time she was interviewed. Which I
Holy
found
shit.
interesting because I've never seen that before, but obviously the police weren't buying her shit from early on. And so, yeah, every time she got brought in for an interview, she got hooked up for a couple questions.
That's why I've never heard that before.
Never heard of that before.
Too bad she couldn't go on a website and request a fake one.
Oh,
There it
man.
is.
Ugh. Darn.
Darn the 90s. So, since we're talking about Susan's interviews, let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk about what she told them and how she was acting. Agent Coldwell, another officer that was present at the McLeod house, asked Susan to walk him through the events of October 25th again, just like she had before. This is a really common thing that they do in interviews to make sure you're telling the right story. And like you've said in other episodes, sometimes they make you start from different points.
As they should.
To really see.
Yes.
And this is what they were really doing with Susan. Susan proceeded to tell him she had called her mother after she came home from work to ask if she could visit her later in the evening. Linda told her that she had other plans and would not be home. Susan made dinner for her sons, but they were fussy and did not want to eat. David called Susan during the time she was preparing dinner, and David later told the police that he could hear his sons in the background and that they did seem fussy. Susan went on to say that at 7:30 p.m., 3-year-old Michael told her he wanted to go to Walmart. Caldwell questioned Susan about this, and Susan admitted that she suggested going to Walmart. She then got Michael and Alex dressed and drove to Foster Park and stayed there until about 8:40 p.m. But she didn't get out of the car. Susan then claimed she returned to the Walmart parking lot because of the bright lights and they could help her search for Alex's bottle that had been dropped in the car.
I just, who takes a 3-year-old and a 14-month-old?
To Walmart that late at night?
Yeah. Yeah. Or like a camping trip.
Yeah.
Weird.
Susan then told Caldwell that Michael had suggested visiting Mitchell Sinclair, the fiance of her best friend, Donna Garner. But then backtracked on that when Caldwell questioned her further about it. Susan told Caldwell that Michael lived less than a mile north of the Monarch intersection, that she had stopped at a red light on Monarch, but saw no other cars at that intersection while she had stopped. Yeah. So that's the stoplight, because obviously, like in the story with the initial kidnapping story, there wasn't a stoplight in there. And this is where the stoplight came into play.
Got it.
So it was the Monarch intersection. So Agent Caldwell went ahead and called Mitchell up and asked him if he was expecting Susan that night. And he told them he wasn't even home that night around 9 p.m. So then they went to Walmart to see if anyone remembered seeing them there, which may sound weird, to see if anyone remembered seeing them in there.
That sounds weird.
But it's a small town, and it was pretty late at night to have a baby and a toddler in Walmart, so they would stick out and honestly be remembered. But no one at Walmart had seen a mother with 2 young children that night at all.
Also, okay, you and I are not the problems, but let's say you and Mike had just gotten engaged and I'm this cheating sleuth over here and was like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with Mike and not have you there. That's weird.
So weird.
Why is that? Why?
I also just like her using Michael to suggest these things that no 3-year-old would be suggesting.
Yeah. Also, that's when you tell your kids, no, it's bedtime, bud.
Exactly.
What an idea.
So, when confronted with this information, Susan completely changed her story and said she had actually driven around for hours with the kids buckled in their car seats, and she didn't want to tell them that from the beginning because she thought that her behavior would be taken as suspicious.
Okay.
So while Susan is being questioned, police are questioning David separately, and he starts telling them about how Susan had been dating other men. He told them all about Tom Finley, and when investigators started to ask for names and numbers of the men and asked more and more about Susan, David was starting to get frustrated that police were more interested in Susan than finding Michael and Alex.
Oh, sweetheart.
Well, we can't blame him that much because
Yeah,
police
he doesn't
never
know.
once tell them that they're suspicious of Susan.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Like, and
He's still,
I mean ever.
yeah. He's still thinking this black man has his kids.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they just say something to him?
I don't know.
That could have alleviated a lot of stress and
Well,
probable
I think
issues with our dear David.
I'll tell you some more things later about David,
Okay.
but I feel like it was a strategy by police. It's a shitty one for
Maybe.
emotional wise and human wise, but I feel like it was a strategy to help them.
Well, also, it could be because it sounds like she's also not in custody at all and she's out and about. And if he knows,
He would be acting different.
correct. And that's not what they needed.
Yes.
So, I mean, I get it. I get it.
We get it, but it's still...
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When investigators spoke with Tom Finley, they discovered that Tom had actually written Susan a letter telling her why they wouldn't work out,
Oh.
which included her children. He didn't want a ready-made family, and then told them about the events that happened that day with Susan. You know, the phone call, the showing up, everything I've gone over. Agent Caldwell took all this information and took a new approach to questioning Susan.
Oh.
Agent Caldwell went back in the room with Susan and let her know that they know all about her relationship with Tom Finley and the letter and how he didn't want her children. He then asked her, did this fact play any role or have any bearing on the disappearance of your children? Susan replied, no man would make me hurt my children. They were my life.
Oh.
Susan had just referred to Michael and Alex in the past tense for the very first time. So Agent Caldwell kept going. He asked her why she lied about Walmart. He asked about why the kids were fussy.
Did he catch her doing that?
And then asked Susan, is that why you killed them? Susan responded by slamming her fists in the table, yelling, you son of a bitch! How can you think that? Susan then got up and left the interview room. It was taking place and yelling, I can't believe you think I did it. Ma'am.
Good enough. That's a little dramatic. What did you say?
A little bit.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of law enforcement noticed that Susan would often make crying emotions and sounds, but no tears would ever happen. Susan never shed an actual tear. Not at the McLeods, not in a plea for the press, not during an interview. Ever. Helicopters with heat sensors were used to fly over John D. Long Lake. They also used divers to search the edges of the lake just in case the car was ditched in there. They searched the area surrounding the lake and the direction Susan told them the car drove off in. But after days of extensive searches and media coverage, nothing was showing up. The community was showing up and out for Michael and Alex, hanging yellow ribbons all over the town for the boys. They were handing out flyers for the boys and the sketch of the man that took them. Everyone was constantly looking for the protege. The boys, the man in the sketch. News stations from all over the country were beginning to roll into town and set up anywhere they could. After 3 long days of interviews and searching, Sheriff Wells did a press conference where he said that they have no solid clues in the kidnapping of Michael and Alex, and that he had not yet ruled out any suspects, including David and Susan. He would not be elaborating on that, and concluded with, "We do not have a car, we do not have the children, we do not have a suspect." This was a strategy for Susan. They did this for Susan. They wanted her to... They're trying to put pressure on her from every angle, and they're using the media to do it. So this is where...
It's because she's getting this attention
This is
from
where
every angle.
I'm going to tell you guys, yes, you are so right. That is a big part of this for Susan. But this is where Margaret and Charlotte are working behind Susan's back and plotting how to use the media against her to catch her. Because Margaret and Charlotte have now been speaking with SLED and everything else, and they are telling them.
They know what the hell's going on.
Yes, and so Susan's not aware, but the Walshaw Nation did end up switching and helping the police with this. Okay. But you are very, very on spot for the fact that we are going to talk about it more, that this is very much about the attention for Susan.
Oh, she's loving this shit.
She's loving this.
That's why she's smirking in every damn picture of her.
Yes. We'll get into that. So the next day, Saturday, October 29th, the Union Daily Times got messy. They posted a story with all the discrepancies in Susan's story that we have already talked about. It was like the public was waiting for the police or media to give them anything to finally admit their suspicions about Susan. Then came the outrage over Susan's story of a black man carjacking her kids and taking her kids. A lot of the public thought Susan's story lacked credibility and was extremely dangerous to the black community. Even the expert who drew the sketch was in agreement with this. He said that while Susan could produce some exact minor details, the rest was very vague and generic, telling him to doubt her the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm really glad this came up because I've been wanting to say something about this since that description. Like, that is...
It was a very upset in the community when it happened. I think my favorite example of this is I was listening to a Nancy Grace on this because she was actually a practicing attorney or prosecutor at the time that this was going on. And her attorney partner that she was trying a case with, they were sitting in court one morning and she goes, "Hey, have you seen the Susan Smith sketch?" And he goes, "I don't want to talk about it." And she goes, "It looks just like you." And he goes, "Everybody has said it." So she was upset and raging because this was so many innocent men could have been accused of this.
Absolutely.
And could have had their lives ruined. And they were stopping. And it was a time of aggression. And a lot of black men were very scared during this time to do anything, go hunt, to move, honestly.
Absolutely.
So it was an outrage. So there's an extra layer of that on top of this.
Rightfully so.
And there's another layer that we will get into later on that. But it is something...
I know the layer.
She does.
I do.
But that was the other half of the controversy with this case for the climate at the time. So, from the very beginning, investigators were suspicious of Susan, and because of this, everything they did was calculated. From the media coverage to the polygraphs to how they questioned her was meticulous. All because of the profile the FBI provided on Susan. Even though everyone was suspicious of Susan, David was never told about this. He even wasn't ever told about her profile. I am now going to read you the profile.
Oh.
Because I have it.
I don't know about this part.
The profile described a woman in her 20s who grew up or lived in poverty, was undereducated, had a family history of either physical or sexual abuse or both, remained isolated from social supports, had depressive and suicidal tendencies, and was usually experiencing rejection by a male lover at the time she murdered. The profile also described how the mother might also find herself enmeshed with her children and show an inability to define her boundaries as separate from her children. The profile also described how depression in the mother was often correlated with a blurring of boundaries. A significantly greater care A mother's biological ties, her strong role expectations to be a mother, her significantly greater care by giving responsibilities, her isolation in carrying out those responsibilities, and her greater tendency towards depression and self-destruction were likely to result in her becoming trapped in enmeshment with her children. During a homicidal act, a mother may view a child as a mere extension of herself rather than a separate being. A mother's suicidal inclination may often be transformed into a filial homicide. So, I know that some of that profile does not seem like it fits her right now because I have not given you all of Susan's actual childhood background, and we will get into that. I promise you. But honestly, I read that profile and was like, well, okay, that was spot on. That was pretty spot on. Pressuring Susan with the media was a major tactic for the police at first. Susan was all about media attention. But once the public began questioning her and making accusations, and reporters started asking more pointed questions, Susan began to shy away from being in the media. So 9 days after the disappearance of Michael and Alex, it was arranged for David and Susan Smith to appear on CBS This Morning.
I do understand why they're having to do what they're doing. I'm all they have. Right now, they have not been able to rule anyone out. I don't think I'm any more of a suspect than anyone in this case right now.
It's very painful to know that anyone would think that either of us had anything to do with this abduction of our children. But me and my wife know the truth.
Susan was asked during this interview if she had any involvement in her children's disappearance, and she responded with, "I did not have anything to do with the abduction of my children. Whoever did this is a sick and emotionally unstable person."
The abduction of her children?
I was going to say, with that wording, she's not wrong.
Yeah, she's not.
When David was asked if he believed Susan, he replied, "Yes, I believe my wife totally." And David meant that. He stood beside Susan throughout all of this, defending her. People who were present when Susan was doing this interview and others described David as being shell-shocked and just a wreck. Susan, on the other hand, was almost giddy, watching the cameras get it set up, and she was smiling and giggling. And then when the cameras roll, she turned it all off and turned on what you just watched. David wasn't lying when he said that either. He 100% believed Susan was innocent. He was even trying to help her pass her polygraph tests and being encouraging every time she failed one. He was right by her side, believing she was innocent. You see, Susan kept telling him she was so nervous. She was scared in the interview rooms. He was trying to help her calm down, ease her anxiety. That's what he thought was making her fail the tests. Susan and David were supposed to do more press interviews that day and other media, but it was all canceled, and instead Susan was brought in by Sheriff Wells for another interview. Susan brought with her a revised statement that changed the location of the intersection where she was carjacked that evening. Susan was getting worn down by all the interrogations and questions from the media. Sheriff Wells knew this, and he knew this was his moment. Susan had changed a major part of her story and signed off on it. So he sat down knee to knee with Susan and straight up told her that he knew her story was a lie. And that her backup story...
Snap and it got weird.
And that her backup story was also a lie. Because he had undercover agents at the intersection doing a drug investigation that night, and no one reported a carjacking or the suspect. He told Susan that he was going to have to tell the media that she lied about the carjacking, and a lot of people were going to be upset with her.
Was that real?
No.
He was just making this
Yeah,
up?
he was just making it up just to, freak her out because he knew that she was done. He knew it.
Gift basket.
Gift basket. Yes. When I read that, I was like, oh!
Yeah.
Because then I was reading, I was like, no way. And then I keep going, and it was all, and none of that was true. They were just trying to get her to confess. I was like, ah!
I love it. I love people.
So.
Nah. Most people. Good detectives. Go on.
He told Susan he was going to have to tell the media that she lied about the carjacking and how her accusations had caused a lot of problems in the community, and a lot of people were going to be upset with her. Susan's response to this was asking him to pray with her. Susan closed the prayer with, "Lord, we know that all things will be revealed to us in time." Wells looked at Susan and said, "Susan, it's time." The way I read that in my best pastor voice in my head, like, I don't know why, but I did.
Jackie, will you pray with me?
Okay. Susan dropped her head and began wailing. "I am so ashamed. I am so ashamed." She asked Sheriff Wells for his gun so she could kill herself before saying, "You don't understand. My children are not okay."
Yeah.
Sheriff Wells had finally done it. He finally got Susan to confess that she did something, but he was not ready for what Susan was about to tell him. At this point, everyone thought that she had hid the kids away from David, and she was going to say where they were. Everyone thought she was hiding them from him. Messy divorce. Wanted some attention. They were at an aunt's, a cousin's, a house somewhere. Buckle up, please.
Another buckle.
Susan began telling him how she felt so lonely and isolated while driving around that night. She had the desire to commit suicide, and it became overwhelming the more she drove around. She had originally planned to drop Michael and Alex off at her mom's house, but she said even her mom couldn't fix this. She went on to tell Wells about all of her problems in her life before collapsing in a sobbing mess. This is when other investigators came in and got Susan to give a written confession. Oddly enough, Susan was able to pull herself together to write 2 perfectly written pages with little hearts and precise, clear handwriting. Susan confessed to driving her Mazda protege to the boat ramp at the John D. Long Lake. She wanted to commit suicide and take Michael and Alex with her because she believed they would be better off with her and God and not here without a mother. She planned for all 3 of them to die that night. She said she put the car in neutral and let it begin rolling down the ramp, but then she panicked, pulled the emergency brake to stop. Susan did this 2 more times before finally putting the emergency brake in place and getting out of the car. Give me a second.
You're good.
While 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, asleep strapped into their car seats in the back seat, Susan reached into the car, released the emergency brake to shut the door, and watched as her car and 2 children rolled into the lake. Susan stood still for 6 minutes, watching as her car filled with water, knowing Michael and Alex were helplessly strapped in their car seats asleep. In her confession, she said she wanted to undo it as soon as it happened, but instead, she ran to the McLeods while thinking up her alibi. Now all that was left was to see if Susan was telling the truth. If you remember, the lake was already searched by divers, but what we left out was that a big mistake was made during those dives. They only searched within 100 feet of the shore because it was assumed that if somebody was going to get rid of a car, they would drive it full speed into the lake and not slowly. This is where I learned that the slower you drive a car into the water, the further it will go because it will be met with less resistance. So if they would have searched further out, they would have found the car in the first couple days. The Mazda protege was found upside down in 18 feet of water. A diver said that he could see a little hand on the window, and both boys were strapped in their car seats hanging upside down. When the car was pulled out of the lake, they found the boys holding each other's hand. Police found everything that you could think of pertaining to David and Susan's marriage, including her wedding dress and their photo album. Susan was then arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. Sheriff Wells then headed to Linda's house to tell David, Linda, and Bev that Susan had confessed and been arrested. Unfortunately, the sheriff's department did not know how to pick up a phone because David was watching the news and had already found out that his wife had killed their children and confessed to it before Sheriff Wells arrived at the house. I don't know why they didn't bring him in. I don't know why they didn't isolate him before it was known. But he found out at the exact same time that the rest of the world found out. Now, I would like to play you a clip from the press conference that announces Susan's arrest, because the audible gasp that you hear when they announce this just shows you how absolutely shocked the community was when this happened.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander 14 months.
It's
The audible gasp. Just, I don't think I've ever heard everyone at a presser just, oh. Usually it's like outrage, you know, but.
Yeah.
So the night Susan was arrested, she wrote David a letter in which she apologized for what she had done a lot. But she was also complaining that her feelings were getting lost in everyone else's grief. Nobody was caring about her. Nobody was asking about her. Her feelings were being lost in everyone's grief for Michael and Alex.
Do you know what hasn't been lost yet? These hands.
Nope. This letter upset David a lot, and after he read her confession, he was left wondering who Susan even was. Needless to say, David was no longer a fan of Susan.
I only assume.
Michael and Alex Smith were laid to rest on November 6th at Buffalo Methodist Church. Michael and Alex were buried together in a white casket with gold trim and laid to rest right next to their uncle Danny Smith, David's older brother who passed away before Susan and David's wedding.
Really quick, I really want to touch back on our sweet David really quick. I know you're going to touch on him a bit later, but just like the first one, hate how he found out. Clearly, you probably saw the face. Not good on my end. If you're just hearing it, the silence was very fucking loud in this room. Secondly, the betrayal that this man must have felt
is insane.
For how much he was backing her, and oh my God, I can't.
I feel for him so much.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like I couldn't even imagine.
I already felt so bad for him, especially with what I do know, but this just takes it to a completely another level.
It really does.
Yeah.
The more and more I researched on this, the more I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So Susan didn't even attend her bail hearing on November 5th because she waived her right to be present and her right to bail.
She said, I'll just stay in jail. It's fine.
The hearing lasted 3 minutes. Her trial wouldn't begin until July of 1995.
Okay, so not that far later.
No.
It's just the next year.
Yes. From the time after her bail hearing until her trial, Susan was jailed at the Women's Correctional Facility in Columbia, 70 miles south of Union. She was given both physical and psychological evaluations by the prison staff and placed on a 24-hour suicide watch. Susan was checked every 15 minutes by a prison card. This suicide watch continued for 8 months until Susan's trial began. Susan was housed in a 6 by 14-foot cell where a light was on 24 hours a day so that a closed-circuit television camera could monitor her. Susan was allowed to keep a Bible, a blanket, and her glasses in a cell. She was also allowed short visits from her family. Because she was on suicide watch, Susan wore a paper gown. I just thought it was very entertaining that she did not have a cushy time in prison from the very beginning at all ever.
6 by 14, though. That's not that small.
But not... She's in there by herself, 24-hour light.
There's apartments in New York that are smaller than that.
Yeah. But I'm pretty happy with what we're getting off the bat.
Yeah, for the rest of it,
yeah.
Fuck that bitch.
About 3 weeks after Susan had confessed, she asked David to visit her at the Women's Correctional Facility. David and Susan met for 1 hour.
Ugh, sorry.
Susan apologized again and again for killing their sons. But when David asked her why she had committed the crime, Susan didn't have an answer. David left feeling sorry for Susan, although his feelings later changed to just pure anger. You know, we got to go through all the stages of grief here. All the stages.
Yeah.
January, before trial began, the prosecution filed notice of intention to seek the death penalty.
Period.
Shortly after this motion, Judge William Howard issued a gag order, which prohibited defense and prosecution from talking about anything that hasn't already been presented to the court. This decision was made based on 2 large factors. All the media that surrounded this case before Susan's arrest and since. But not only that, but the O.J. Simpson trial was going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though these cases are on opposite coasts, they were both national cases that were causing a media circus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, also, can we go back and pair her false accusation of a black man during the O.J. Simpson That's the climate I was talking about, y'all. Not just South Carolina.
Yeah.
At that time. In Columbia. Yeah.
He was here, she was here, and it...
Yeah, so I mean... West Coast,
Craziness.
East Coast, battle of the true crime right now.
Yeah.
The months before trial, Susan's defense team had her undergo a psychiatric evaluation. This evaluation lasted 3 months, and Dr. Halleck determined that Susan had a personality disorder. I'm shocked. She feels that Susan can't do things on her own and is heavily dependent on other people, especially men. She needs constant affection and attention from men. She discovered that Susan was only depressed when she was alone. She was always fine when she was around other people, though, so she didn't suffer from deep depression. Just a little depression here and there. But her childhood, family history, and suicide attempt shows that Susan does suffer from depression at times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to being an adult.
Thank you. In May, the judge ordered Susan to be evaluated by Dr. Morgan on behalf of the prosecution. David and Susan's divorce was also finalized in May, and Michael and Alex's toys and clothing were divided in half.
What?
Yeah, I thought that was super unfair. I don't know why it got divided in half. Her ass is... she isn't found guilty and in jail yet, but, like...
Hey, quick question. What the fuck?
I don't know.
Okay.
Right before trial began, Bev, who is now divorced from Linda, sent Susan a letter telling her that his heart breaks for her and she doesn't have all the guilt for this tragedy.
Ugh.
And you will find out what the fuck that means during trial.
Oh, I just forgot. I forgot and then remembered what you said and now I feel icky.
Yeah. Just before trial, defense attorney David Bruck proposed Susan plead guilty to the murders and be sentenced to 30 years to life. But solicitor Thomas Pope for the prosecution said, nope, we want the death penalty. And let me tell you something about Thomas Pope. He was like 32 years old. He's like the youngest solicitor in like the state at this time. And everyone was like, you bit off more than you could chew. And I was watching a documentary and he goes, at the time, I was like, no, I didn't. He goes, looking back, I did.
We love a self-aware king. All right.
So July 10th, 1995, Susan's trial for the murder of Michael and Alex began. And it was a media frenzy leading up to the trial.
Oh, I bet.
Every hotel room was booked. They even had to turn a skating rink into a makeshift hotel for media.
How do you turn a skating
rink? They put a whole
rink
bunch of beds in there, and like, yeah, it was a media staging. They just went there to sleep, basically.
It was like a natural disaster shelter,
basically,
but for media.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So many people actually showed up for trial, they had to turn people away. And I want to play a few clips of Susan showing up to the courthouse the first day so y'all can get a feel for the climate. Once inside the courtroom, Judge Howard sided with the defense and decided to not allow cameras in the courtroom. He mainly used the O.J. Simpson trial currently going on and citing all the issues the cameras in the courtroom was causing there.
But if we didn't have cameras in there, we wouldn't have the beautiful glove picture.
Yes. Also, this courthouse was really old, I heard, and every movement, everything, like, echoed and was really loud.
That's fair.
Like, at one point, the judge was like, listen, when you get in here and you sit down, don't move. Like, no adjusting in your seat, no getting up, because, don't move your feet, don't be moving your stuff, because everything echoed so bad.
Oh, how awful. I'm such a fidgety person. I could never. You see how much we move just sitting here for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
As Susan Smith came to court this morning, an angry crowd was there to greet her. Many were from Union's African-American community, angry not only at the death of 2 innocent children, but also at the racial aspect of the case.
Her lying about it, saying that a black man done it, she didn't have no business doing that.
Smith arrived at the courthouse under heavy security and hiding from everyone who came to see her. The angry crowd of onlookers jeered. Smith was led into the courthouse without showing her face.
Pretty wild reaction for, like, she's not even a celebrity. I mean, like, this is like feeling like some real true 90s, like, court cases outside of the courthouse with the mobs and the people and the yelling. Like, we don't get this anymore. It's not like this.
I love it.
It was great. I mean,
they keep things too under wrap now.
They do.
Very frustrating.
David was only 24 at the time, and everything he knew was taken away. And now he's in the middle of a media circus and national trial. There were reporters on his lawn. They were even hiding in trees. He had no privacy, so David decided to just take it one day at a time and just focus on each day of the trial and getting through it.
In his trees?
Once again, I feel so bad. Oh yeah, the big old lens scopes hiding in trees everywhere.
Gosh. Okay.
Witnesses that were called included law enforcement, forensics experts, Bev, Susan's stepdad, Tom Finley. The defense said Susan would not be taking the stand because she is unable to defend herself and would be defenseless against all questioning.
I just had a thought. What if police didn't tell him because because of the media scrutiny that he could have gotten from knowing and still defending her?
Yeah, them not telling him was all a tactic.
Absolutely,
for Susan, but I've heard David a couple times say that he wished he would have known he didn't like being in the dark.
That's absolutely valid. That's a completely valid feeling. But I do also understand that they were trying to protect him in the same realm here.
Yeah. I get why they did it. It's just fucked up.
Yeah. Please proceed.
Prosecution opened up with the fact that for 9 days, Susan pleaded for her children back on national TV, when all along she knew where they were, in a car at the bottom of the lake. They went on to say Susan did this to start a new life with a wealthy young man in town. They painted her as a cold-blooded killer who needed to get her kids out of the way so that she could get the guy and live her dream life. Tom Finley took the stand to read the letter he sent Susan when he broke up with her.
He did not. Oh.
So it read, "Dear Susan, you will make some man a good wife one day, but unfortunately it won't be me. We come from 2 different backgrounds. Susan, I could really fall for you, but some things aren't just suited for me. And yes, I'm talking about your children. I do not want children, and I don't want the responsibility of your children." He ends the letter by telling Susan, to have a good time and capture some youth you missed. And a very ominous final statement, you have to make your own decisions in life. Remember, you have to live with those consequences also.
That was in his letter?
Yep. It was the end of his letter was, you have to make your own decisions in life. Remember, you have to live with the consequences also.
Oh?
There's a lot more to this letter. It was 2 pages in total, but you get the point. Jeez. Prosecution showed the jury a video of the car sinking into the water via a camera mounted on the back seat. The jury sat and watched in real time for 6 minutes as it took the car to fully submerge. They were shown in real time how the boys spent the last 6 minutes of their lives. Was
this a recreation?
Yeah, they literally they rolled a car into the lake with a camera mounted in the back seat where the boys would have been to show how long and what the boys saw and the fear that they had as she did this.
Diabolical.
Cinematic.
Oh my God.
Also, I want to note that it is mentioned by David at some point that the headlights were left on. He took that as that she left them on so she could see it go underwater. There were no lights in this area of the lake that were on that evening. Also, Susan's demeanor about this video with no jury present versus with the jury present is a very stark difference. Before the jury came in, she was writing notes with her attorney and giggling. Once the jury is there, she begins crying and watching the video.
Actually crying?
Pretending to cry. Defense opened up talking about Susan's depression and how she had a deeply troubled childhood. That she intended to kill herself with Michael and Alex. This wasn't her fault. We have told y'all bits and pieces of Susan's childhood, but the defense really used her childhood in trial, so we're going to go through that real quick. Susan's parents are Harry and Linda Vaughn. Harry was a violent alcoholic, and Susan's home life was very dysfunctional. Susan and her brother Scotty were constantly scared. When Susan was in preschool, her older brother Michael tried to hang himself. He was then in and out of facilities Susan's whole childhood. Susan was described as a very sad, unhappy child, but she loved her dad. Harry was always smiling and happy around her. Harry and Linda divorced after 17 years of marriage. Susan was just 6 years old. Harry was devastated by the divorce, which threw him into a depression and escalated his drinking even more. And after a series of fights with Linda, Harry took a gun and shot himself in the stomach. He called 911 and later died from the injuries.
In the stomach?
It was speculated that he wasn't trying to kill himself. It was an intention thing to get Linda back. But he died, he shot himself in the stomach and then ended up dying from it.
You can literally bleed out from a stomach.
Which is what he
wound.
did. Yeah.
In like less than 30 minutes.
He bled out before paramedics got there.
Yep.
Yeah. Harry's suicide left a hole in Susan's life. She kept only 2 things from her dad, his coin collection and a recording of his voice. 2 weeks after the divorce, Linda married Bev Russell. He was a successful businessman.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Jesus Christ.
He was a successful businessman in the area and had daughters from his first marriage. Linda, Susan, and Scotty moved from their home in Mount Vernon to Bev's house in Union. Susan was smart. She excelled in school. She was always on the honor roll. She was in a bunch of clubs. She volunteered in a lot of places. She graduated high school in 1989, voted the friendliest female. I bet she was. When Susan was 15, almost 16, her older sister came to stay with them, so she let her have her room and she took the couch.
So Bev's kid.
Older daughter.
Okay.
Before bed, Bev came down and was sitting on the couch, so Susan curled up in his lap to go to sleep. You know, like a little kid. Bev didn't stop Susan. Instead, Susan awoke to Bev sliding his hands from her shoulder to her chest. Bev then placed Susan's hands on his genitals. Later, Susan told her mom about it and told her that she didn't stop him because she wanted to see how far he would go. Which is just wild.
You said 15, 16? Shoot.
Ugh. Bev was reported for this by Susan. And an investigation began, and during the investigation, Bev moved out of the family home. Meanwhile, Linda called a school counselor and got the 3 of them into family counseling. But that only lasted for about 4 or 5 sessions, and then Bev moved back into the house. The family blamed Susan just as much as Bev, if not more, saying that if she wouldn't have reported, the community wouldn't know. The molesting didn't stop when Susan was 17. She reported Bev to her high school counselor again. Because of mandatory reporting, another investigation ensued, and Bev didn't deny it. But nothing came from it because no charges were filed by Susan, which is assumed because Linda pressured her not to. Her counselor said, "Fuck that," and kept fighting. The judgment was ultimately sealed, though. Bev testified in Susan's trial about the letter he sent Susan. He basically said that he was responsible for the boy's death as well. And this paired with Dr. Hellick's testimony about Susan being schizophrenia and how she hears voices and has psychotic episodes is how we found out that Susan was still in a sexual relationship with Bev while also being in a sexual relationship with David and Tom all at the same time.
Oh, I feel disgusting.
Oh.
Everyone took this as the defense trying to turn Susan into a victim.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Not the same quick question I had earlier, but on the same lines. I already forgot the question, but what? Okay, no. So, if she was continuing this sexual relationship with him, why did she keep turning him in?
I don't know. It's just very interesting.
Make it make sense.
Because she needs male attention.
Disgusting.
So, 9 men and 3 women made up the jury, which the defense thought was really unfair. No, I don't either.
How would that be unfair?
Wouldn't it be more in her favor since she likes to charm the men?
That's what I was just
wouldn't it
thinking,
be
too.
Wouldn't it be like more in her favor to have less women on that jury?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It only took 2.5 hours for the jury to deliberate and decide that Susan was guilty on 2 counts of murder.
Good.
Period.
Then came sentencing.
Like, directly after?
No, not
Fine.
like right after, but we had a separate
people
thing.
wait.
David Smith actually pushed the prosecution to seek the death penalty. All his hopes, dreams, and everything he had planned for the rest of his life had ended that day. And to him, that would be justice for his boys. Jury said no to the death penalty, instead opting for 2 concurrent life sentences in prison. She would be eligible for parole after 30 years. But the thing is, this is where it gets confusing, because at the time, the jury didn't know that. She got 2 life sentences, but at that time, she wouldn't be up for parole.
Yeah.
It wasn't a couple years after a law got changed that grandfathered crimes that happened before. It was like the
like 96 or something.
The law changed. Anyone convicted of life in prison before January 1st, 1995 would be eligible for parole after 30 years.
You said before?
Yes, and her
Hers
crime...
wasn't until July of 95, though.
That she was convicted, but did it mean...
So, did they grandfather in 95 then?
Before January 1st in 95, it's her crimes she's convicted for crimes that were committed before January 1st. She has to be convicted for crimes committed before that. And so therefore, the jury really truly did think life meant life in prison at that time. That is why they rejected the death penalty and gave her life, because it is harder to get a jury to take the death penalty because they somehow feel better about themselves putting someone in prison for life than they do about sentencing someone to death. It's just easier to get a conviction on a life than it is a death penalty, most of the time.
I'm going to keep my opinions to myself.
So, that's not our opinions. That's just the general opinion.
I know, and that's why I'm going to keep it to myself.
Basically, the jury thought that she would never see parole, but she ended up doing that.
Mm-hmm.
David said that he will be at every parole hearing to make sure that life means life.
Uh-huh.
Susan was originally incarcerated at the Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina.
I know about this part.
Enter her sexcapades with correctional officers.
Yep.
This woman just cannot be without a man.
Yeah.
And I believe there's like 3 or 4 of them that she was involved with. And another odd twist is that, like, she wasn't hated in prison. Which you would think that a mom who killed her children would be. She actually ended up with, like, a following. And, like, a group of friends. Like, it was weird. She is not hated in prison. She is actually pretty well liked.
Yeah, she has it good. Which is wild.
Mind-blowing.
Wild.
But all of her sexcapades got her moved to the Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, South Carolina. Which cut down on all of that happening. But now that we can't sleep with all the COs, we're going to do drugs, and we're going to deal them. So she collected some drug charges. And I think we had some, like, assaulty things, but nothing, like, crazy.
Yeah.
But she is constantly in trouble for drugs. Down below in our notes, I actually have it linked, all of her infractions in prison. And what she got taken away each time. She got phone privileges taken away for, like, a year a lot. Like, not like 30 days, but, like, yeah, there's a lot of 365 days
is Beth
taken
still
away.
Calling her?
I don't know. On November 20th, 2024, 53-year-old Susan Smith was up for parole. Susan appeared virtually before the parole board. David got to appear in person, though. And we're going to play you some of it, but we're going to have to do it in chunks because she spends a lot of it fake crying.
Still?
Yeah, and you can really see what law enforcement was talking about back in the day with her hysterics, but no actual tears.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alice with all my heart. That I'm sorry that I put them through that. I really, really am. I'm really sorry to the drivers that I had to find them. I wish I could take that back. I really do. I didn't lie to get away with it. I really didn't. I was just scared. I didn't know how I could tell the people that loved them that they would never see them again. I didn't know how I could tell David he couldn't see his sons again. And I'm sorry. I don't know. I know that's not enough. I know it's not, but I don't know. I know those just sound like words, but they come from my heart. They really do.
She, like, can't even seem to compose herself to even answer questions about what she would do after release and other things. It's wild. Like, she's still, like, dramatically doing this whole thing instead of being an adult, being like, yes, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. I am sorry. They go over her alcohol and drug use and her disciplinary actions. They asked her, how does she think they can trust her out in the real world to not do this if they can't trust her to not do it in prison? And she just makes excuses about why she got the infraction. She isn't guilty of it. She even had the audacity to say she hasn't been in trouble before. And she
was set up.
And that she has grown up in the last 10 years.
Okay.
I said the last 10 years.
So
she's been in jail for 30.
I know.
So at 40, we decided to grow up.
Yeah.
David, who is now remarried and has a daughter,
Good.
also spoke at her parole hearing. And he just made the most heartfelt plea to not let her out, and how it's not enough time. It's 15 years for each boy. That's not enough.
Just here to advocate on Michael and Alex's behalf and as their father. You know, God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do. She purposely meant to end her life. I never have felt any remorse from her for it. She's never expressed any to me. I never seen it on paper. That through the state's law, life imprisonment, 30 years to life. And now that's different, but at that time, that's what counts. I understand that. But ultimately, to me, that's only 15 years per child. Her own children. It's just not enough. So I'm asking that you please deny her parole today. And hopefully in the future, but specifically today. Not let her out. I miss them very much. And I love them very much. And I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that their death doesn't go in vain. Thank you.
He was definitely hurt because her parole was denied, and she can go before the parole board again in 2 years. Something she's probably going to do. But I will say something very funny that I learned after she got denied her parole. Susan went back into her cell and threw a fit. Not because she wasn't getting out, but because this just ruined her chance to be on Dancing with the Stars. When I tell you, this woman was already lining up things for when she got out of prison. She was so delusional that she thought she was going to be on Dancing with the Stars if she got out for parole.
I know why.
Is that not wild?
I know why she's having these thoughts.
I mean, we saw what happened with Gypsy Rose.
Yes.
That's exactly where my mind's at.
Something I found just absolutely just terrible and sad, and I don't even have another word to describe like how awful this is. All of this was so traumatic for David that his brain has actually blocked out a lot of the memories of Michael and Alex. He has been told that they will come back one day, but he's still waiting. He has home movies and some memories, like Michael loved riding on the lawnmower with him, and he liked to fall asleep on him. But that's it. He has nothing else. Everything is blocked. And that's awful that he can't even remember.
It's barbaric.
It is. And that part is what made me so mad about the police not telling him and letting him in. I understand their tactic, but the damage it did to David is awful. And that just broke my heart.
For a small devil's advocate, even if they let him in, this still could have happened.
It could have, yes. But I think this is the first time we've ever heard of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had no idea.
Well, and also they were so young that, like, ultimately, 3 years of memories can seem like a lot, but...
Yeah. Like, we don't remember that, but parents remember all of that.
Yeah.
David takes a lot of comfort in the many, many people who tell him that they keep pictures of his boys on the same shelf with their kids and grandkids. That their kids are on their fridge right next to his. And there are so many people in this world who do not let those boys go without being remembered. And I love that. So, we did get justice for Michael and Alex.
Yes.
Susan is serving a life sentence, and she was denied parole. And as long as she continues to get denied parole, I believe that we continue to get justice for Michael and Alex.
Mm-hmm.
What do you got?
These hands? That's what I got.
Yeah.
Ugh.
There's so much more to that than you knew, huh?
I want to make a threat, but I'm not going to.
We don't have a legal team yet for that.
Yeah, that's why I'm not doing it.
So I hope you guys learned some things that you didn't know about. Unless you were an adult in the 90s, then you knew all of this.
I was 3.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe 4.
We were little toddling around.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
Mm-hmm.
If you enjoyed that incredibly fucked up story, go ahead and hit that subscribe and follow button so you never miss an episode or an update.
Even if you didn't enjoy it, still do it.
Still hit it, because maybe you'll like next week's.
It's a fucked up story.
So it's next week's.
And the week after that. Every story we do is pretty fucked up.
It kind of is.
What's that say about us?
What's it say about the world?
It's a sick world we're living in.
But if you hit that follow subscribe button, you're never going to miss an episode.
Yes.
And also, if you haven't already, check out our website at justice4podcast.com. You can find all of our episodes, resources, and links out to all of our social media. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're funny. We post updates over there, post other behind-the-scenes stuff, sneak peeks. So make sure you're following us over there as well so you don't miss anything. And if there's a case that you want more information on, you absolutely love, you've never heard a podcast on our website, you can submit that case under case submissions. And we've actually been getting quite a few lately.
I love it.
And we're loving it.
Just to touch on what Jackie was saying, we have a lot of resources on our website. If you are feeling hopeless or depressed or alone, you can reach out to us. We also have the resources that you can reach out to other people as well.
Yes. We are always here for you too.
We are. We are absolutely always here for you.
All right.
That's all I got.
Do your thing, chicken wing.
We love you guys. We'll catch you next week. Okay. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.